Thank you and welcome, Dr. Awad, to this interview. My name is Jenna Slotin from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. I'm very pleased to be conducting the interview today. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has really turned everything upside down across all walks of life. It's also shown that we need timely and accurate data now more than ever in order to plan immediate response as well as to be thinking through sort of relief and recovery as we move forward. In the world of national statistics, regular statistical programs have needed to ensure operational continuity as well as meeting the immediate data demands of policymakers. And so very quickly, as we began to contend with the pandemic, the UN Statistical Division, in partnership with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and Open Data Watch, launched a website to provide a space for the global statistical community to share different guidance, actions, tools, and best practices to ensure that operational continuity and to meet those immediate and urgent data needs in response and recovery for COVID. And so, with that introduction, I'd like to turn to questions that we have for you. And maybe we'll start with a focus on what are the main challenges that your organization is facing in responding to COVID-19? And what's been the role of the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics in coordinating national COVID-19 data collection efforts in the country? Over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenna. And I also want to thank you, and I want to thank also UNSD and DFID project for the website. It was really very, very useful. Based on your first question on the challenges and how we actually operated, yes, it was a crisis that all NSOs and all the world, faced. The challenge mainly was, how we can be really very much relevant because, our role was so crucial as NSOs to provide. We became the key source of information for the government and for the country. How can we be really reliable, relevant, and also try to make sure that quality is there. The main challenge, how we were able to switch to new data collection, because as you may know, in Palestine, there was a lockdown, so there was no way for any kind of field work. And how we were able to adjust ourselves to move to another new data collection, to a new tool of a data collection, and what are actually our priorities based on the developments that we had in the country. So this was really very crucial on how we want to move forward. The second challenge was actually how we can get more engaged with the end use of the admin data under and utilize it under such crisis. So from our side, also how we were able to contact and manage our staff during the lockdown, because not all of our staff has actually, laptops, mainly the statisticians, or even an internet access. And how we were able to operate. And this was actually a kind of what we may say as a crisis management. So in a way, we were able to form an emergency team that looked down on our priorities and our what we can actually continue and work on, how we want to develop new methodologies, how we can change our data collection tools, how we can get more engaged and more communicate with our partners, whether we are talking about government, institutions, civil organizations, and private sector too.
Great. There's a lot of great examples in that response, and I believe we'll be touching on many of them as we move through. So I suppose my first question is on continuity of key statistical operations in the face of that lockdown, in the face of those restrictions that you were dealing with in doing field data collection, for example, for surveys. Are there any specific steps you took in that regard?
Absolutely. I mean, if we are talking about the field work, for example, we decided to continue with the price indices, for example, and using the phone as a tool of a data collection. So we moved from a field work of face-to-face interview to a phone and tablet data collection way of entering the data. We did kind of decentralization of work within the governorates that we are working. We've decided on what are actually our priorities now, what is important for the crisis to collect. So we decided to continue the labor force survey and to keep going with the price indices, because there was also a kind of real fluctuation in the prices within, I mean, the market, and also within the labor force, because also we succeeded in contacting immediately the ILO and see if they have any kind of development towards, I mean, entering new indicators and questions to the questionnaire in order to try to measure the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on labor. And this is how we adjusted very quickly, and we moved to a phone data collection. The good advantage that we had, that we implemented our population and establishment and housing census in 2017, and at that time we collected all the contact information. So that's why it was a way that helped us in succeeding towards moving from field data collection towards a phone data collection. And we did a trial and it went really well. A kind of decentralization between the governorates, because you can't centralize the whole operation within having such kind of, the pandemic and the lockdown. So we did kind of operation team, and where we used to meet through also, WebEx and Zoom, and it was a kind of a day-to-day operation management process, whether we look on the data quality, on the whole process of the data collection. And on the other side, I mean, don't forget that we have, as national statistical offices, a real treasure of data that it can really be utilized. So the not only what we are running and what we want to run as a data collection, it was also what we already have and what we can extract from what we from the sources that we get. And that was really very important, because the time we had, the COVID-19 pandemic in Palestine, the time we started to immediately produce even the data that we have already produced, but I mean the relevant data towards the COVID-19 pandemic indicators, I mean the real priorities. And the most important thing, and I may stress here on the point for NSOs, the successful way of coping with this COVID-19 pandemic inside the institution, but also outside, engaging with our partners, whether we are talking about the government, civil organizations, and private sector. We conducted so many meetings, virtual meetings with them, to listen to their priorities, to listen to their needs. And we were immediately, providing them with all what they are asking for. In addition, on daily basis, providing data in general on Palestine, but also specific on mainly the most areas that was actually very much affected with the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is how we were engaged very much, and we were engaged so closely with all of our partners and stakeholders from all perspectives. So that's why we started from day one, uh, um, providing them with the current data and extracting data from the current surveys that we have, and also from the census that we conducted in 2017. This is on one dimension. The second dimension, it was doing kind of, projections and estimates on the impact of COVID-19 on our economy. And this was very much close cooperation and coordination with all of our stakeholders from the private sector and from the government. So whatever, and also from the international organizations. So all the economic projections that we've done, we discuss it first with them. We discuss actually the assumptions with them based on each economic activity, and then we did our economic projections, and there was a real consensus on that. And we didn't stop there, because any development we often updated, and we produce another new version. So this is another dimension that we worked on. So we had three kind of dimensions: use the relevant data, the available one, and extract indicators from the current surveys and from the current resources. The second one, do kind of projections. And the third one, actually running and reprioritizing our work in the field. So we didn't, we stopped so many activities, and we just prioritized what the main activities that we have to run in the field, and we did it actually by phone. So this is how it went. But the coordination, the engagement, the communication, it was mainly on daily basis, really on daily basis with all of our partners, sometimes with all of them. Um, uh, and we used to do kind of bringing the private sector. The most important thing I will tell you, that no one approached us at the beginning. No, everyone was very much overwhelmed with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on all aspects of our lives. So no one brought the attention to PCBS, to our office. But we actually, we started and initiate so many activities. We promote also our work. This is also important. So and afterwards, they recognize our importance, and the importance of getting really relevant data and timely data to all aspects. So the first time we weren't approached, and then we were very much, get more engaged with them. But we were the first who initiated the engagement and the communication.
Great, great. I want to come back to something you mentioned briefly earlier on about administrative data. I was wondering if you have, in light of the emergency, the crisis situation, have you adopted any new processes to make more extensive use of administrative sources? And if so, has this allowed the statistical office to produce statistics and disseminate products that weren't feasible before?
Absolutely. Before it was running regularly, trying to develop things and getting the data sets. But in the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is one of the lessons learned, actually, that, we agreed with them on the minimal set of data that we have to get from the admin data. So it's not actually something that we have to get everything. It's what we have to get from the admin data. So we agreed on the minimal data set that we have to get from the admin data. It was much easier for them to focus, and we cooperated a lot on working together, reviewing together, and producing the first few reports together, and then they made it on their own. So that was of the really great lessons that we had here in Palestine, because one of our real concerns in our national statistical system was actually how we can really develop our admin data, because I mean, we're not really utilizing them in the best way ever, but I mean, being focused really and defining the priorities and the minimum data set was really a great exercise.
That's great. So one of the elements that's critical to making best use of those administrative sources is interoperability, to integrate different sets of data to respond to increased data demand. What steps is PCBS taking to ensure that data relevant to COVID-19 can be used across different systems and across different organizational boundaries in the government?
I mean, for us, this COVID-19 pandemic was a real. I mean, it was a crisis on everyone, but I mean, it was for us a way that we opened our eyes how we can move really very much different, and this can be worked really very well, and to focus exactly on from the what we're working actually on within the data interoperability. I mean, we have to invest really more in the NSOs, more on our development of information technology on the IT infrastructure, because was, for example, one of our bottlenecks. It wasn't really the case uh, of statistics or data. It was actually the bottleneck in our information technology infrastructure. And the second one, also more investment in the GIS. And the third one, how we can really start putting the admin data more, uh, giving it a more priority, and how we can do kind of really data interoperability with our actually partners and stakeholders and the admin sources. We started actually focusing on this within the UNSDDFID project, and we were thinking before we started the COVID-19 pandemic that we have to start actually within the best data admin sources, which was actually the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. And we started working on that, but I think we have to invest more within the data interoperability, mainly with our admin sources and admin data, much more than any other thing. And the second part that that we can develop really new methodologies towards, what we collect. I mean, in a cheaper way, in an efficient way, and in a timeliness way, and also securing also the data quality. So it's important to put it in progress all the time. When you talk about national statistical offices, we often focus a lot on what we want to produce, what is the important, we are able to produce. So it's not anymore the data production rather than the complementary tools and mechanisms, which we often lack now. And this was really shown very clearly within the COVID-19 pandemic, and how we did. And the most important thing also to keep more investment with the capacity development of our staff on the new tools that we can use and be part of the system, whether having a crisis or not. I mean,
Yeah. So that's so interesting because you've touched on the way you've worked with different stakeholders, both within government and outside government, the relationship of administrative sources and interoperability and your bottlenecks with respect to IT infrastructure. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about the way you've opened up to the private and non-traditional sources of data. So I understand you discussed and understood the needs of these different stakeholders to identify what was the crucial data to prioritize. But have you also opened up more in light of the pandemic to data coming from actors outside government in private sector or non-governmental organizations to produce trustworthy statistical outputs?
Thank you. Yes, first, as a National Statistical Office, we were very open. We had such a very, I mean, open to provide all data. So, I mean, all the all the data that we have, all the time series we were providing. So there was no kind of restrictions whatsoever. So this is the access free and the openness with our partners, I mean, gave us also the advantage for them also to cooperate and open their data. And the time we engaged and communicate with our private sector, um, uh, we listened to their needs and we provided them immediately their needs for their companies and for, I mean, for the private sector, what they are asking, we immediately provide with maps, with data, time series as they wanted. So we were working actually just, providing data as much as possible to all of them. And then this opened that let's work together on, when we discussed with them the projection of the impact of COVID-19 on our economy here in Palestine. And this is where we started to that there was kind of mutual communication between us and more openness on what we have and what they have in order to really be able to measure the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on our economy. And so that's how we started with them. We worked closely with them on the projections, and then we were asked to work on the losses of our economy based on economic activity. And this is how we started to, okay, we don't have the data, but the data, you have it. So what you have in order to really be able to measure the losses of each of our economic activity. And then the third phase was how we can set up plans to really, overcome and the impact of COVID-19 on our economy, how they can really develop the economy after such crisis. And I'm telling you, we as PCBS played a real role in with the policymakers to refine their decisions. So whatever, before they actually get any decision, they used to communicate a lot with us before even opening, the country, opening the market, which kind of economic activity they can open, what are actually the losses, even the kind of what they have to support. So we provided so much data on the micro businesses and the small businesses and the high risk of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on closing such micro and small businesses. And this is how how they were able to support, how they were able to make their decisions. So really, I think we had the advantage in this crisis, in the COVID-19 pandemic, that we, our role was shown how much important PCBS role was in such crisis.
It's amazing the steps you've been able to take and the opportunities and changes with respect to some of the relationships with key stakeholders, as well as some of the solutions and tools you've been able to employ as a result of the crisis. And so, I guess, with a final sort of question to kind of summarize the experience so far is of all these learnings and all these steps that you've taken, do you see a sort of continuity to a new normal where some of those solutions will continue, where perhaps activities that you may have been doing before are perhaps not as needed given the new things that you've developed, solutions, approaches. Have the relationships been changed and the role that PCBS is playing vis-a-vis other policymakers? What kinds of changes do you see carrying forward beyond the pandemic?
Although, I mean, the pandemic was really, I mean, bad in all aspects, but I'm telling you, it was very positive to our experience and to the way of how we have really, I mean, it was a shock that, I mean, stop it, let's work differently. I mean, so maybe I don't want to say that we were naive, but we were working, progressing. But I mean, I think we weren't as fast as when the pandemic started and just put things on track and said, well, you can't work as before. You have to work differently. I mean, it opened really our eyes on the most important thing that beyond our also statistical work is, I mean, the communication, the engagement, listening. We have to listen to the needs. I mean, we have to make the priorities based on the needs, the real needs. I mean, and we have to change the way of thinking. We have really, I mean, it's the time to really focus on our on so many aspects in the mechanism that we are working, and it's important that we have to keep the communication and the engagement, not only because we had this pandemic. It has to be part of our system. It has to be part of our strategy. I mean, we listen to the needs. Now we are running in the field. Um, one face, I mean, a field data collection and one a virtual. And actually, we took the needs not only of the government, also of the civil organizations, of the private sector, and we put them, integrate them with our actually surveys. So this is, it's a, you know, give and take. So we can't just take everything. In order to have this kind of mutual engagement, it has to be a mutual benefit between all parties. So that's why, I mean, now we are running the impact of COVID-19 on our economic activities, on the establishments. And the second one, it's on the impact of COVID-19. It's a household survey. So, but I mean, we had such a real partnership where we listened and integrated the needs of all of our stakeholders. It's also important not only to provide data, it's important to be part of the operations, to listen on the importance of so many issues. So, for example, it's not before my mandate to, you know, to set up, to be a member of setting up a recovery plan for all the economic activities. Now we are a member of it. So when I'm a member of a policy-making team, I also learn more on the needs and on the importance of what they want. So it's also mutual. Without being a member of such team, I could not, as NSO and within my staff members, that, I mean, we can listen to what they are asking for and the relevance of what they are and the timeliness that they are asking for. So now we are part of the setting up plans of recovery of the economic activities, setting up a plan on poverty, and on so many aspects. We are also a member with the high-level committee headed by the Prime Minister, where we are on daily basis. I mean, they provide reports and we provide them with reports on the current data that we produce. But the most important thing, no one knows. I mean, I think the last thing I may say, that before no one knew about the importance of our role. And we used to think that they have to know. No, they don't have to know. We have to let them know how important our data is, how important our role is. So when we used to produce data and publish data, we put, also the efforts that have been put on getting such data, which they didn't know before. We thought that they have to know it by heart, but they don't know actually the nature of our work. So kind of marketing, promoting our role is important. So this is how they knew our role and the importance of our role. And we're not supposed to sit on our chair and wait for our stakeholders to ask us what they want. We have to be the initiator. We have to be the one who approach everyone. And that's why how the cycle can be completed. I really feel now much more satisfied than the 10 years I was heading this institution. I'm so much as an NSO very much engaged with the whole aspect of, of Palestine. And this is the way that we have to work on. The challenge is how to continue different.
Thank you so much, and congratulations for all those developments. As you say, while the pandemic has certainly not been a positive for anyone, it is laudable and exciting to see the changes and the way in which your organization and you have responded to the shock. It is a shock, but working differently to respond, and then being much more fully integrated into policymaking and engaging much more with data users effectively and a whole range of stakeholders is really exciting. So I think that's a wonderful note to end on. I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up now, but thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights and your experiences. I think it will be of great interest to others in the statistical community and beyond to listen and to hear. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I want to tell you that we really also benefited a lot from the best practices all over our sisters and SOs and from the UNST and from all international UN organizations. They were really marvelous, and we benefited a lot. And I'm telling you, even the website that have been set up by the UNSD DFID project was marvelous. And we also appreciate all the efforts, and everything is now globalized. Even the pandemic is a global crisis, and we all learned from all experiences. And that's also another positive way on how we can also, it's not something that I have only to think on how I want to overcome it. There are so many best practices that you can learn from, and that is really amazing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.